Hey, what's up, everybody? So, I recently took a survey to study the gaps between what software bootcamp grads know and what hiring managers look for. And one thing that came up on both sides was software testing. So, I just wanted to get the ball rolling on covering those gaps by starting to talk about software testing. So, software testing is a way to ensure that when you write new code or when you refactor old code, everything still works as expected, all without having to poke around yourself and make sure everything works yourself. So, as your code grows or as more people work on your code, tests become increasingly important in maintaining the robustness of your code base and making sure that bugs don't just casually slip into production. It's also a very easy way to stand out in interviews because so few candidates actually think about testing. So let me walk you through the anatomy of a test written in a testing framework for JavaScript called Jest, explain why tests add value to a code base, and then I'll get you started with writing some basic tests. Okay, so we have two files from some code from a personal project open right here. On the right, we have a function called convert letters to notes. It takes an array of words called words, an object of letters, filled letters, and then it returns an object of two arrays, notes to play and letters to toggle. And on the right, we have the test file associated with the function. And all we're doing here is we're importing the function and then we're just running it through a bunch of different scenarios. Now, there's a few reasons that this is valuable. First off, for someone who's never worked on my code before, it can be an assurance that everything I've written works as expected. I mean, look, the tests are passing right now, so that's a sanity check. Okay? Now, secondly, tests can provide valuable information on what input and output are supposed to look like, as if it was like a layer of documentation. Notice how words and fill letters are all explicitly defined. It shows you exactly what it's supposed to look like, as well as for notes to play, which array of strings, and letters to toggle, also an array of strings. And this can be very useful if you're working in a weakly typed language like JavaScript. And thirdly, if I decided I wanted to refactor this function, my test will let me know if something went horribly wrong, not only within my test, but also in the rest of my code. So let's say I wanted to turn let's say I didn't want these to be arrays anymore. Let's say I wanted them to be objects instead. Now, pay attention to my CLI down here. I'm going to save this file. It's going to run the test, and look at that. They all fail now, and the failure makes sense. Notes to play.push is not a function. Notes to play.push is not a function. This makes sense. Push is not a method that exists on objects, so I would have to rewrite the function until all of these tests pass. Or I'd have to rewrite the tests. I mean, if I'm chaining these in objects, I'd have to rewrite the tests. So with that, let's start with writing some basic tests. So let's pretend we're writing a useful function called multiply. And all it does is take two numbers and returns the product of those numbers. And then it'll also throw an error if any of the inputs are anything but a number, or if more than two arguments or only one argument is passed in, then we would throw an error. All right, so how would we write a test for something like this? All right, so first thing we do, make sure you have npm and node installed, and make sure you have a new npm file. So if you don't know how to do that, you would just type in npm init --y, and this is assuming you have npm and node installed by now. So I'm just going to delete that. So the way to go about this, we're going to use a testing framework called Jest. So we're going to do npm install Jest. Now, I already installed it, so it should not look like this for you unless you've already installed it as well. Okay, so now here's how we go about making a test. We're going to make a new file, and usually the convention is that you name your test file after the file. So this would be index, and then we do .test.js. So notice now it is a red.js, so that's how you know it's a test file. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to import the multiply function. So it will be const multiply equals require, and then we're going to call the file index. Yeah. So now, next thing we're going to do is we're going to create our describe block and our it blocks. So let's go back to here. The describe block contains a bunch of tests, and then each it block is one test. So the describe function basically takes two arguments, like this. So the first argument is a string, and the string is just a description of the thing that you're testing. So in this case, multiply function. And I'm actually going to bring this over here just so we can have them side by side. Now, the second argument is going to be a callback, and this is where we put all of our tests. So we're going to write it, and, not instance of, it. And just like describe, it's going to take two arguments. A string, in this case, it's going to be, you know, like what you expect the function to do given certain circumstances. So for example, this will be it should multiply two numbers. That's it. And then we also, like with the describe block, we're going to pass in a callback. And now this is where the actual testing work happens. So if you look over here, this is what causes these tests to pass. These expect statements. And they're kind of written like English. So like here we're saying expect notes to play to equal this array. Okay? That's basically all it is. You write expect, pass something in, you write a matcher, which I'll talk more about later, and then what you expect this to be. So in that case, it's going to look like this. Expect multiply 2 and 3 to be 6. Okay? 2b operates similarly to 2 equal, but it's a little different. 2b is more for like primary, so we'll get into that later. So now the way to run the test is you go into your terminal and you just type Jest. And let's see what happens. Hey, look at that. It passed. All right, so are we done? I mean, well, it does more than just multiply two numbers. It actually checks the inputs and then throws an error if something is wrong. So we're going to check to see if this works, okay? So now let's write a new if statement. It should throw an error if the inputs are not numbers. Well, I should say if at least one of the inputs, at least one of the inputs are not numbers. Okay? So again, call back. Excuse me. All right. So now you would think that it would be something like this, right? So we're going to do expect multiply 2 by hello 2. So we're not going to expect it to be anything. We're going to expect it to throw. That's how you would write that's how you write that you expect this to throw an error. Now, let's see what happens when we type Jest. Oh, and look at this. We get a failing test. So this is a gotcha of Jest. All right? So here's the problem. We're running this function, and it's supposed to throw an error. You would think that this throws, right? However, this is just the value, okay? So we're not getting anything back. We're just getting an error, okay? So that means the way to get around this will be something like this. You pass it in as a callback instead of a value, okay? And so that should make our test pass. And look at that, it does. And now the final thing we're going to do is we're going to test to see if it actually works with this. Well, you might not need to do this. It's definitely a bit overkill, but you know, it's very important to be thorough with these kinds of things. So let's say we want to pass in 3 numbers, but this multiply function only takes 2 numbers. So let's see if that works, and look at that. It has passed. Our super narrow function has all these beautiful tests with it. When you write tests, you can probably come up with more. I mean, maybe for such a contrived example, this is probably the limit, but with something like this, where there's a lot more going on, you could probably think of more tests to write than what I have here. So like for here, it works with 1 word and all the letters are filled in, 2 words and all the letters are filled in, and these tests can get really complicated really quickly. Like for one, this one contains mocking, and we'll discuss mocking another time. CF2B, matchers to be called. What else do I have here? Up to equal, to be, and to equal are definitely different things. I will post a link to all the possible matchers in the comments. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to do more of these, and I'll see you back here soon.